Barack Obama through the corner of my eye here, speaking in Boston, talking about illnesses. Guy had cancer. His wife had cancer. You know, the sob stories, which, you know, these stories designed to take the focus off the fact that you're losing your insurance if you're one of 15 million people. You were lied to for 3 years, and now you got to change insurance. You got to change doctors. You're probably going to have to pay more for insurance that you don't want. And now he's saying, you know, I don't think we should go back. And you're looking at these mind-numbed robots. I don't know anything about them, so I don't know if they're sick. God, I hope they're not. But standing behind him is, you know, human props as usual. Nobody fainted that I could see. But they're like nodding and smiling at him, staring dreamily at him, like, oh my, he's wonderful. It's sad. It's sad. All right, let me know when we have Heather. Okay, great. All right, folks, New York City is about to elect a new mayor, mainly because Mayor Bloomberg couldn't finagle his way into a fourth term. And the Democratic candidate has a 40 or so point lead over the Republican candidate. And this Democratic candidate, Bill DiBlasio, is not only talking about two New Yorks, like two Americas, and separating and dividing by income and wealth and success, but he's also going to put the harness on the New York City Police Department. And I got to tell you, I work here every day in the city. I don't live here, but I fear, because I lived through David Dinkins and his administration. Joining us now to talk about all this is Heather MacDonald, fellow at the Manhattan Institute and contributor to City Journal and the New York Post. Hello, Heather. How are you? Good to see you.
Thanks for having me on, Steve. I appreciate it.
It's always my pleasure. Okay, so you wrote a great piece, and you asked the question, you know, why are New Yorkers willing to risk the success of a crime drop in a safe city, you know, for the thrill of voting for a progressive mayor who has made attacking NYPD the centerpiece of his campaign? And you say it's got to be ignorance.
It is. I mean, obviously, there's also just pure juvenile adolescent politics of wanting to feel progressive and anti-establishment and soaking the rich. But I also think that New Yorkers are utterly oblivious to the extent of New York's amazing crime drop and its uniqueness in the country. There was a crime drop nationally in the 1990s, and the critics and skeptics about New York policing always try to conflate the national crime drop with New York's crime drop. What they ignore is that New York's crime drop was twice that of the national average and has lasted twice as long. The national crime drop basically petered out by 2000, and every criminologist predicted that New York's would as well. Murders had already gone down 72%, and there's a feeling they can't go any further. In fact, under Mayor Michael Bloomberg and Police Commissioner Ray Kelly, murders fell another 36% from 2001 to 2012, and all major felonies went down another 31%. This is a crime drop of unprecedented proportions, and it's due exclusively, the difference between the national and the New York crime drop is due exclusively to New York's policing.
Absolutely, and you point out not only the wrong, the downright false, comparisons between the national crime rate and the drop in crime in New York City, but you also talk about how there were predictions, that things would get worse when in fact they continue to get better under the Bloomberg Kelly regime.
Yeah, well, criminologists have always hated New York City because it was a piece of received wisdom that policing could not affect crime. The only way you could bring crime down was through big government welfare and redistribution programs, because crime was seen as a inevitable response to poverty and income inequality. And police commissioners themselves, until William Bratton came into the NYPD in 1994, said, yeah, we can't do anything about crime. That's for society to solve. But Bratton said, no, the police are going to do it, and we have the capacity to restore law and order, and that's exactly what they did.
Yeah, no, absolutely they did. Now, why don't you talk about what the 1-2 punch that New Yorkers are facing here, because we had the judge ruling against stop and frisk or a great part of it anyway. We have the appointment of a federal monitor that's going to, reign over whoever the police commissioner is. And by the way, the police commissioner will not be Raymond Kelly, all indications are. So you have that combination, a new police commissioner, a mayor who doesn't want stop and frisk, a mayor who wants to rein in the police, and a federal government watching over the whole thing.
And, of course, an inspector general that the city council, in its utter just foolishness and self-involvement, created. So you have really three competing power sources now to disrupt what was an extraordinarily well-managed and efficient department. The inspector general, which will exist, and frankly, we're going to get the federal monitor because there's very little chance that the Second Circuit would overturn Judge Shira Scheinland's opinion, even if that appeal continued, and if DiBlasio is elected, which is almost certain, unfortunately, he'll simply withdraw the appeal. So you have the federal monitor, and then ultimately you do have Judge Shira Scheinland, whose opinion evinces an absolutely perfect and unclouded ignorance of policing and crime in New York.
I like that analogy. We're talking, or that label. We're talking to Heather MacDonald, contributing editor of City Journal, and by the way, author of Are Cops Racist? Here on the Steve Malzberg Show. I just saw something the other day, a report that more and more homeless people are living and riding the New York City subway than they have in years and years, and it's attributable, at least in the piece that I saw, to the fact that cops, they're unsure about what they could do, what they can't do, how far they should go, so they're basically laying off. They don't want to be accused of violating someone's civil rights. They don't want to be accused of anything and hauled before, some kind of disciplinary action or a judge even. So they're just letting these people be, and the riders are scared, and it harkens way back to the Dinkins era.
Yeah. Well, we're going to be seeing a lot of these claims in the next year or so, and it's always hard to know at what point you can attribute cause and effect. And to be honest, I've heard people complain about a rise in homelessness in New York City for the last decade, and one should celebrate those concerns because there are few things that are more destructive to the vitality of cities than allowing drug addicts and vagrants who are down on their luck to colonize public spaces. If in New York City, of all places, where we have an absolute constitutional right to shelter, people should be obliged to use it rather than taking over spaces that people need to get to work and engage in the commerce that New York provides. So, whether this is a recent, whether the rise is real and whether it's attributed to the officers' understandable reluctance to make stops, I don't know. But I would say over the long haul, if in fact the police are way restrained from being able to make lawful, reasonable suspicion stops, you're going to get more crime, and you will get the deterrent effect of stops, which has now deterred many gangbangers from carrying guns on their person. That will eviscerate and will go back to a much, much higher crime city.
Yeah, and let's take it back to where we started with the voters. I blame the voters, but I have to say, they voted for Rudy Giuliani twice. They voted for Bloomberg. To be honest with you, I couldn't tell you when he was a Republican and when he was an independent and when he was a Democrat or whatever the heck he was. But now I just think Joe Lhota, who served in the Giuliani administration, has run basically an invisible campaign, a terrible campaign, because if he would go on show after show and hold press conference after press conference and go down to the subways and just, pose with the police commissioner, whatever it is, and just drum this point home that there's nothing more important than safety, and we're going to lose that, maybe it will be a 5 or 10 point race and not a 40-point race.
It's very disappointing, Steve. It just... I don't understand it, but it just shows that, political skills are not ubiquitous. Not everybody has them. And Lhota was a fabulous manager, and de Blasio has absolutely no management experience. He's just been a government hanger-on all his life. But Lhota did not run the best campaign. There's just no question. And the most shocking moment was in the first debate when he was asked, would DiBlasio jeopardize public safety in New York, rather than striking this low, slow-hanging pitch right out of the park, he waffled and said he didn't know. So he's obviously got a very cautious nature, and has not educated New Yorkers about the absolute fragility of our current situation and the fact that it could all go back again.
Yeah, and in fact, on other issues like social issues, he's made it a point to stress that there's very little, if any, difference between himself and DiBlasio. So I don't know who's advising him. I don't know if he has it in his belly. Apparently he doesn't, or it doesn't look like he does. Might be attributable to your analysis that, being a manager is one thing, being a candidate is another. But still in all, someone had to vet him out, and he did win a primary for whatever reason. And it's a shame. It really is a shame that this isn't a race about what the future of the city will be like, and for us people who work here, and for people who live here and do business here.
Well, I think we saw with Steve Lonigan running against Cory Booker the sheer power of belief. Whether or not one believes with everything Lonigan thought, he was absolutely fearless in articulating what are very stigmatized views in blue New Jersey, and yet he narrowed the gap because he was so passionate and unapologetic. And I think that Giuliani had that magic as well of being able to stand up to the received wisdom of New York, which celebrates a dependency culture, believes in big government, vilifies success, and thinks that government is the solution. And Giuliani would have none of that, and he was articulate and just driven to fight the received wisdom, and that's what this city needs, because you are running against a very, very large liberal elite, and Loda, unfortunately, has run a Me Too campaign to de Blasio. He basically accepts the conceit of there being two New York, and says, well, I'm going to do it somewhat differently, but I agree that income inequality is the biggest problem facing this city. I strongly disagree with that, and in any case, if de Blasio is going to go around talking about two New Yorks, getting rid of the NYPD's crime-fighting capacity is going to accentuate the greatest rift between prosperous and less prosperous areas, which is public safety.
Absolutely. Heather, always great to talk to you. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Steve.
Take care. Heather MacDonald, ladies and gentlemen, fellow at the Manhattan Institute, contributor to City Journal and the New York Post, and just a brilliant, brilliant woman. And her analysis is always right on target. Also, her book, Are Cops Racist? Here on the Steve Malzberg Show. And we are here, of course, on Newsmax TV and radio, 877 Newsmax, 877-639-7629. Love to hear from you.